Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, CHULLIN Daf Chavches. We begin at the third line off the top, Tashma. Listen to this kasha. This relates back to the statement made by Rabbi Yehuda quoting an opinion, quoting a shita that the procedure of shchita that's applied to oif, to bird, to fowl, is not sourced in the Torah. It's not even Torah Shabbal Peh. Rather, it is a din midrabanan. Here comes a kasha, Tashma, from a Mishnah, which we had the other day. Malak besakin. A fellow takes a bird, a carbon bird, which is meant to undergo malika, which involves the kain's fingernail used to clip off the head. Instead, he uses a sakin. So he used a sakin to do malika. Malika means from the back of the neck. Right location, but wrong instrument. Malak besakin. And he cuts through. Metame begadim abeis habliya. The bird is now considered a dead bird, a nevela. In which case, a person will be metame, will infect his begadim. The clothing that he's wearing will become tummy while he's swallowing this material, because it's a dead bird and an nevela bird is metame in this manner. And the question is like this: why is it going to be considered an nevela? I understand it did not have the proper malika experience. Fine, but the amras ein shchita loif min Torah. But if shchita isn't really required min Torah either, so you don't have to do a proper, prescribed, halachically acceptable shchita process to a bird. So in this case, if you don't need shchita, what then do you need? We discussed it yesterday. You have to kill the bird by way of the simanim. You have to cut, you have to somehow sever the simanim in a different way. That's what he did over here. Ultimately, he accessed the bird by way of the simanim. It's true that when he broke through the shedra, the spinal mafrekas, and the backbone, on the way to the simanim, because he went from the back in, havila treifa, the animal is now classified as a treifa, it's severely wounded. But we all know that even by a treifa, once you follow with a shchit, a proper shchita, whatever shchita is acceptable, relative to this context, it salvages it from becoming a nevela. It spares it from any tumor. Havila treifa, tehanala sakna. So this knife cutting through the simanim should benefit, should at least impact it in a way that it will spare it from becoming tummy. Latara midei nevela, to spare it from a nevela status. Now, you're right. If you need a proper, halachically acceptable shchita, which is from the throat in this case, he didn't do that. But if you don't really need a proper shchita, just a quasi shchita, you have to, cut it from the, sever the simanim in some way. So even in this case, when he came from the back, it's true he pressed hard, and that's not really considered a proper shchita, or sort of the knife got embedded. That's chalada, dras, all kinds of deficiencies which apply to a standard shchita. But in this case, you don't need standard shchita. So this should count like a regular shchita, and it should spare it from being an avela. If in fact it is true that birds do not need a proper certified shchita. You're right. You're 100% right. The other opinion, that shchita is not required by a bird, is following a different opinion, reflected in a different brisa, that in fact disagrees with this brisa, which seems to say that it needs a proper shchita. The Sani, we have the other brisa, Rab Lezer HaKapar, that was his name, Berevi, the great one. Oimer, he teaches as follows. So the pasuk they were speaking about Pisuli HaMikdashim, a carbon, animal that got blemished and is unfit for akrava. The pasuk compares it to a tzvi, to an ayil, to a tzvi, a certain kind of animal, some say a deer. Just like you eat those, you eat this. What's the comparative equation here? What are we trying to source from the mitzvah ayil? Miata, what's What's the derivation from there? Me'ata. Oh, so you have to say that really we're not learning from there. They are learning from us. It appears that it's Tzvi v'ayil coming to teach us something, but truthfully, he's learning from us. How? Makish, the pasuk is now connecting, comparing, linking Tzvi v'ayil, which is a chaya, to what? L'psuli HaMikdash. Comparing it to Psuli HaMikdash, where we know shchita is required because in the previous pasuk it says v'zavachta. And we learn that v'zavachta, the act of shchita, applies to other animals as well. Ma pesuli hamikdash b'shchita. So just like shchita is applicable and required by pesuli hamikdashim, af tzvi v'ayil b'shchita. Likewise, shchita is required for tzvi v'ayil. So we're comparing tzvi v'ayil, which is a form of chayos, to the Yisrael Mikdashim, which are behemoths, and only they require shechita. But a bird, that we don't need shechita for. We have the pasuk v'shafach yesterday. Rabbi Shafach is dame. For a bird, it's enough to attack it at the simanim in any way, and therefore the Gemara concludes v'ayif ein lo shechita midivrei Torah el midivrei seifrim. Okay, so based on this drasha, as our Kapper says, we prove that the shechita by a bird is not min haTorah, only min Rabbanon. So that's the source of that opinion. What about the opposing view? Mantana de Palaglei. Who's the shita that disagrees with the Rabbi Lezer HaKapper, whose opinion is reflected in the previous brisa that we discussed before, that shechita in fact is applicable to birds as well? That's Rabbi the Sani, we have a brisa, Rabbi Yomer v'zavachta kasher tzivisicha. So you meant to do zvicha as I have instructed you, and if you look back throughout the Torah, we don't seem to find, any delineation of the hilchas shchita, any discussion of the halachas of shchita. Malami, we learn from this pasuk that it was orally transmitted to Moshe Rabbeinu. Malamish and Ustav Moshe. Moshe was taught by Hashem ala veshet v'ala kana, regarding cutting through the veshet, the kana v'al rei v'echad ba'oif. By a bird, you cut through most of one siman. V'al rei v'shnayim b'behem, by the behem, it's two simanim mostly. Okay, so we have a machlokes regarding shchita soif. Rabbi says it's min haTorah. Rabbi Lezer HaKapper disagrees. It's only min Rabbanon. Echad ba'oif. Back to the Mishnah. By oif, you do shchita on one of the simanim, and that's enough. Now, which one of the two? We have the esophagus. We have the trachea. Which one? Itmar Rav Nachman Amar. It's your choice. It's up to you. Oy veshet oikana. Cut through either one, and you're good. Rav Adabar Rava Amar. No, veshet v'loikana. He must cut through the veshet, which is the primary source of vitality. And that works. But cutting through just the kana, the windpipe, does not work. And Rashi points out that by the veshet we find that even a small puncture renders the animal a treifa, versus the kana, which can be cut halfway through and still be considered perfectly healthy. Apparently the veshet is more sensitive and more delicate. Hence, the shechita must be applied to the veshet. If you want to get away with just one kana, it has to be the veshet. One siman, it has to be the veshet. Rav Nachman Amar, oy veshet oikana, it doesn't matter which one. The Mishnah says echad katana, it says one. Echad koldu, whichever one you decide. Rav Adabar Rava Amar, no, veshet v'loikana. He has to cut through the veshet. It doesn't work by just the kana. Why? My echad, the Mishnah says echad, it means the primary siman, miyuchad. Basically becomes a kasha, where it seems that it only works on the veshet, not on the kana. Meisvei shachat es veshet. So he has this bird, and he cuts through the veshet. And then he notices that the gargeret, the trachea, jumped out of its place, detached. Kshera, that's okay, because it's after the fact. He did the shechita already, it's done. However, nishmat gargeret, the gargeret jumps out of place, detaches, then he cuts through the veshet, pesula, because the animal is already a treifa. Now, suppose he's not sure when it happened. Shochat as a veshet, he cuts through the veshet, and then he discovers the gargeres to have snapped out of place. V'nimsis ha-gargeres shemuta. Any day, he doesn't know when it happened, before or after. Im kodim shchita, before the shchita nishmata, did it get detached? Im la'achar shchita nishmata, or whether it was detached after the shchita, once, in safe territory. So which way do we? So this actually occurred as a story. Chachamim ruled we have to be strict. Kol safek b'shchita. Whenever we have an uncertainty regarding the shchita procedure, psula, we consider it to be possible. Remember, we had this discussion way back because of the chazaka. The animal is presumed to be asur until proven otherwise. Now, if we pay close attention to the wording of the brisa and the examples that were cited, v'ilu, but still, shchita begargeres like tani. There's no mention of a shchita only in the gargeres. Why does the brisa choose to refer to the shchita in the veshet, not in the gargeres? Mishum the gargeres. Oh, so apparently you would think it's because you can't. One cannot just cut through the gargeres only. That's a right to that opinion. No, says the Gemara. Who says? Perhaps gargeres is just as good as the veshet. Mishum the gargeres avid l'shtamuti. Look, the brisa is trying to highlight situations of snapped, simonim. That typically happens by the gargeres. It snaps out of place. That's why we take this angle, but technically it can work the other way around too. Tashmai comes another raya that the shchita must be specifically on the veshet. Shachat shnei chatzoy simanim ba'if. Let's say he cuts through 2 of the simanim, but only halfway, half of this and half of that. Psula, doesn't work. You need at least one completely or right. Certainly by a behema, which needs a bigger shchita, more extensive shchita, halves don't work. By a bird, ensure that you cut through not just the siman, but also the viridin, the surrounding arteries, to drain the blood. We'll see that later on. The veshet and the viridin. Now, why is he referring to shchita of the veshet only? This implies that if you're going to do one, you have to do the veshet and not the gargeres. No, mishum the veshet sounds like viridin. Perhaps the reason why he cited the veshet as an example is because it's right next to the viridin, so it conveniently goes together. And that highlights his point. The requirement to cut through the viridin. But technically, you can do the shchita on the kana as well and jump over to the viridin on the other side. But he just, spoke about a more convenient, smooth, procedure, which is going to be more typical because you want to cut through the viridin. But technically, you could do just the kana as well. Tashma is another raya. Shachat chatzi gargeres v'shok de shchita acheres. Suppose you cut through half the gargeres, 50%, took a pause, and the pause was the length of time that it takes to do a proper shchita, which we call in halachic terms shehiyah, a long pause. But in this case, it won't really harm anything. You know why? Because he only cut through half the gargeres. Half the gargeres can just be ignored. Why Rashi brings that it doesn't even make the animal a treifa or the bird a treifa. Half is just a insignificant blemish. So it's as though he never started the act of shchita. The gomer, so he comes back and he cuts the rest. That's like sure, it's okay. My love ba'if, we're assuming that it's a bird. My gomer, and when it says he completed it, gomer gargeres, he cut through gargeres. Oh, that's right to Rav Nachman. One or the other. Either the veshet or the gargeres. Loi bebehema. No, we're speaking about a behema maybe. Umay gomer l'shchita kula. And the brisa says he completed. He means he cut through the gargeres and the veshet. So it has no relevance to our discussion. We're not talking about birds at all. Rashi says it's behema means it's even a behema. And we're talking that he did the whole thing. We're not speaking about cutting through just one siman of the bird. Tashma is another raya. Okay, this bird started with a half-split kana. Okay, so far, no harm, right? Voice of kosher, and he takes his knife and he pushes through a little bit more. Continues the slit. Pushes it past the 50 mark, 50 mark line. And he completed the cut. It works. My laboif was assuming that it's a bird, and shchita of the gargeres is enough. Umay gomer l'kana. When Brisa speaks about completing, it means the kana. So you see, kana is enough. Loi b'behem was speaking even about behema. Umay gomer l'veshel. When it says gomer, it means he finished the whole procedure, both simanim. Tashma, here comes one final raya that it's up to you, one or the other. Tashma, ketzad molken chatasoif. So again, we had this a couple of days ago. How does one proceed with the malika procedure on a chatas ha'oif, on a bird chatas? Okay, he takes his fingernail, he starts from the back, he cuts through the shedra, the spinal, mafrekas, and the backbone below the basa without most of the flesh. You don't do that now, because if you do that, the animals are dead before you even started. So you leave that on the side and you come back to it soon. Or the kana, one or the other. He cuts through one of those and he goes back to finish the roiv basar. He cuts through one pipe only with the flesh. By the oil you need 2 simanim cut, two or most of them. So clearly, it doesn't have to involve specifically, the veshet. It could be the veshet or the kana. And that's a tiyufta, a refutation to Rav Adav tiyufta, who insists on doing just a veshet by a bird. Here we see that the malika v'chatas ha'oif can apply to either veshet or kana, and we assume malika is just another version of shchita. Apparently shchita works one or the other. Tiyufta, the Rav Adav tiyufta. In fact, we prove one or the other. Ma'yav. So what's the conclusion on this question? What do you mean Ma'yav? We just said, obviously just concluded that it's okay. Dilma, no, maybe there it's different. It's incomparable to regular shchita. Dilma shani hasan, perhaps by the malika, it's different because you're cutting through everything, the spinal, the backbone. So yeah, in that type of circumstance, one siman is enough, either or, because you've struck down and terminated its life force on all sides. Shani Asam Dika Shedr, my freckles, you're cutting through the spine on the backbone, but a regular shchita where you're coming from the front, just one pipe, who says? One pipe is enough. So what's the direction? Tashma. Here comes a right from a story. There was a certain bar avza, a certain young duckling, that was bleeding on the neck. Tavabei Rava, which was in Rava's area, Rava's property. Also, he came along, came in masmes. Kuei, his neck area was blotched with blood. Apparently he was injured. Amar Rabbi Echinabis says, Rabbi, what are we going to do to confirm that he's not a treifa, that he's kosher for consumption? We turn to the base. So in this case, certainly a bidika, an examination, is required to ensure that he wasn't injured in the neck and the simanim, which would render him a treifa. Should we do the shchita and then examine what's beneath it? Well, you can't really confirm anything. Dilma b'makim nekev kashachat. Perhaps it so happens that the shchita cut encountered the pre-existing puncture. Perhaps the bird was punctured, and now when you cut through and you do shchita, you'll be cutting through that same exact spot. You'll never be able to discern it. Okay, nivdake, should we examine him before the shchita, and then do the shchita? You can't. It's not practical. Rabbi teaches us a veshet, to determine whether there's a puncture in a veshet, in the food pipe. You can't check it from the outside, Rashi says, because it's reddish on the outside. Even if it got punctured, it got, chances are it got scabbed, it got, blood filled in, and then it blends into the surrounding color. The only thing you can do is check it from the inside after shchita, because the inside is white membrane, so you turn it inside out and you can see whether there's a little mark there. So you can't do bedika prior to shchita. So what do we do? We're stuck with this bird. Amalei Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef, who was Rabbi's son, says, I have an idea. Let's do a piecemeal examination. First, do the bedika on the external side of the kana, which can be checked from the outside. The kana is white. Okay, we're done there. Confirm that it's unpunctured. Then cut through the kana. So the kana was safe and sound. Cut through it, you're good. And that enables the bird, meaning that's a proper shchita procedure. We're not done. And then you examine the veshet from inside out. Then you flip the veshet inside out. Okay, so now you have the white side exposed, and you can confirm whether there was a mark, whether there was an injury, a scab. We'll have to again check it. So you're good to go. Amar Rava, I was very impressed as Rava. Chachem Yosef Bri, my son Yosef, is really wise and knowledgeable and expert in halachas of betrefas, like the great expert Rabbi Yechna. Bottom line is, here it was only a shchita on the kana, and it was fine. Alma, apparently, Echad, the Kama, the Mishnah says, do shchita on one simon by a bird, it's one or the other. Either the Kana or the Veshet. So that's the conclusion. Okay, so again, we speak about the shchita of a bird, which some say is min Torah, some say min Rabbanon. We have machlekes whether it's, the Mishnah says one simon, whether it's Kana or Veshet, and that's the conclusion, or it needs to be the Veshet only. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, we're not done. Ashishchas Havridin, he has to cut through the Vridin as well, the surrounding arteries, the veins. Now, the question is, first of all, is that only by birds or even by animals? Secondly, is it part of the shchita procedure, or is it just a sort of a side procedure? Amar Rav Chizda, first of all, Lo Amar Rabbi Yehuda el Boif. Rabbi Yehuda only applied this to an oif, to a bird, and it was not really meant as part of the shchita. The purpose was Hoyel v'tzeleu kula ke'echad. Since you typically roast a bird as one unit, you don't take it apart, you're going to get stuck with the blood inside, and you're going to be running into issues of consuming blood. A totally different concept here. So the concern is blood. Hence, you sever the vridin to drain the blood. Aval behema by a behema, which is typically dissected, given the menatche, ever since he will dissect it part by part, before he roasts it, before he salts it, right? There's no need to worry about the blood, which will drain automatically. L'meimra the time of Rabbi Yehuda mishum damu. Do you mean to say Rabbi Yehuda's concern is blood concern, unrelated to the act of shchita? V'atnan Rabbi Yehuda Omer achi shches havridin. Look at Rabbi Yehuda's choice of words. You have to shecht. The shchita applies to the vridin as well. Apparently, it's part of the shchita. Rashi says if it's just about extracting the blood, he didn't have to use the word shchita, which sounds like he has to slice through them. Just puncture them. Give them a little, poke. Yeah, you're right. That's what he means. Ach yinkev savridin, puncture them is enough. So why does he refer to shchita here? Ach yinkev b'shah shchita. He has to puncture them at the time of shchita. As the Gemara later will explain, the blood is still warm and flowing and soluble. Tashmai comes another kasha. Vridin b'shchita. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to shech the vridin. It's not enough to puncture them. Eimai means to say, v'ridin tzarech l'nak m'shah shchita, he has to puncture them at the time of shchita, did Rabbi Yehuda. Tashmai comes another kasha. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda, Chacham responded to him, look, me'acha shalei huskar v'ridin ela loitz me'an dam, if the whole purpose of even referring to the v'ridin is simply for purposes of draining them, mali b'shchita, mali shle b'shchita, what's the difference if you do an act of shchita on them or not? The whole point is just to drain them. Apparently Rabbi insists on an act of shchita. No, he can't relate. They just meant to say like this. Timing was the issue. All agree puncturing is enough. Mali l'nakvan b'shas shchita. What's the difference if you do it during the shchita? Mali l'nakvan shle b'shas shchita, or you do it later on? Why do you insist on doing it right now? V'hu savarida holds. No, there's a reason for it. Let me explain. B'shas shchita, during the act of shchita, while you're Asi dam, the blood will flow out the chayim because it's warm and soluble. Shalei b'shas shchita, if you wait, till later, le'asi dam, once the blood cools down and starts congealing, you're not going to get it drained out properly. Boy, Rabbi Yehuda had the same question. He didn't know the whole Gemara before, so he came to ask. I have a question. When Rabbi Yehuda speaks about cutting through the vridin, was it meant as part and parcel of the shchita procedure? Or is it sort of just a separate concern, unrelated, just a practical matter of draining the blood? Rabbi Yehuda's vridin, shaban, suppose he paused. So when he cut through them, he waited and he did shehiyah, which typically disqualifies an act of shchita. Dorasban, when he pressed down too hard, what's the status here? Do we need shchita as shchita? Or Amalei was Saba, so this elder, this sage told him, Chacham told him, no. Chacham Rabbi Lezer explained. Some say Amalei was Saba Rabbi Lezer. Some say Saba was addressing Rabbi Lezer, quoting Rabbi Yochanan. Chacham Rabbi Yochanan. No, you don't have to do an act of shchita to the vrid. Menak von bekois. Just take a pointy thorn, puncture through the meksherim, and now everything is okay. So clearly, it's not an act of shchita. It's just a practical matter of draining the blood. Continues the Gemara with a rioter of Chizda who had explained that Rabbi Yehuda is only concerned about the bird because it's roasted as one. We have a rioter that from a brisa. Tanya Kabaseder of Chizda. Here is a brisa in support of Chizda's approach. Shachat shnei chatzoy simonim. Boy, okay, this fellow took a bird, cut through both simonim, but only halfway in each. Possible it doesn't work because you need a full cut, or mostly. And certainly by a behema, It goes without saying, if he does this type of thing, but behema, it doesn't work, which a behema needs more than if to begin with, it needs both simanim. Rabbi the Omer, ba'if, make sure by the bird that you do more than the siman. You do the breeding as well. He has to cut through the veshet, and the breeding, as explained, and clearly it's specific to birds only, as per Rav Chizda's explanation. Continues the Gemara. Mishnah says, if you only cut through half the siman by a bird, it doesn't work. It needs to be entirely cut, or mostly. Itma, we have an interesting discussion between Rav and Rav Kahana. Itma, Rav Amar mechza al mechza. If something is half and half, like when you cut through half the siman, half cut, half uncut. So when it's a smaller portion, less than 50%, then it's not considered done, right? When it's mostly done, it's 51%, then it's rive. Rive is considered like the entire thing. But what if it's exactly 50-50? Two ways to look at it. Shall we say it's like less than majority, or is it like the majority? Because it's not minority, but it's not majority. So what is it? Rabba Amar mechza kiroiv. When it's half, it's considered like rive. The Gemara at this point figures that he's talking about a half shchita. You cut through half, it's like majority. And it works. Rav Kahana Amar, no, mechza, half and half, ain't a kiroiv. It's not regarded like rive. If you cut through half the siman, you haven't done shchita yet. Explains the Gemara. Why would we say half and half works? Rav Amar, mechza is kiroiv. Why? The Hachi Amar l'Rachon l'Moshe, Hashem taught Moshe, instructed him on the shchita procedure. He didn't say you have to do 51%. Like the Shaya Ruba, don't leave it mostly uncut. So it's not mostly uncut, by default, it's considered mostly cut. So 50% does that. Rav Kahana Amar, no, mechza ain't a kiroiv. Cutting 50% is not regarded like roiv. Just the opposite. You have to do roiv. Hachi Amal Rachman Moshe. Hashem teaches Moshe shechait ruba. Shechita is accomplished by cutting through roiv, 51%. So according to him, according to everybody, roiv is a factor by shechita, but which way? In the positive or the negative? Rav Kahana says in the positive you have to do shechita, an active roiv. Rav says, as long as it's not roiv unshechted, you're good. Tanan, here comes a kasha on Rav from our Mishnah. Look at our Mishnah. Tanan, chatzi echad b'oif. He does a siman of the oif, or 1.5 by the behema. It doesn't work, right? Why? According to you, 50% works. The amris mechza kiroiv. You say 50% is like roiv. Amai pasal. Why is it a failed shchita? However, roiv, he did roiv. 50% is roiv. You're right. Torah it would work with the Rabbanan. Rabbanan forbade eating this animal because you're cutting corner. You're cutting it too close. Cutting it too, right? But the Rabbanan, Dilma, there's always a concern. Dilma you might not do exactly 50%. You're going to play with millimeters. You might just miss the 50. And then it's possible Torah. Don't take chances, and we can't allow it. Amrav Katina Tashma. He brings it right from a totally different halacha. This is a tanur of cheres. You have an oven, which is like this big round, pottery configuration. The only way to relieve it of a tumah, if it became tumah, you have to break it apart. Now, breakage means it's mostly broken. Right? So if you mostly break it, mostly crack it, then it's considered demolished, and the tumah leaves. Chilka l'shnaim. Suppose he slices the tanner into two perfect halves. Vein shavin, they're perfectly equal. Shneim tmei, they're both tummy, because none of them are considered broken off the tanner, because they're not a piece off the tanner. They're 50% of the tanner. Okay, so if most of the tanner remains intact, that's not considered demolished, right? So again, chilka l'shnaim, is split into two parts, ve'ein shavin, they're exactly equal, 50% and 50%, shneim tmein, they're both tummy. They both retain their status. L'fisha yefshel tzamtzim. And the reason is because you can never know. You can never measure up with exactness that they're in fact exactly 50%. We assume that one of them is a drop over the 50% mark, and you can't know which one it is. So whichever one has in it the majority is going to retain its status. And since you don't know which one it is, they're both presumed to be tummy. But that's only because practically you can't confirm. But let's say you could. Theoretically, suppose you could confirm with exactness that there are two exact perfect halves. What would be tahir? They're both tahir. Because they're both considered broken off the tanur. Because they're not considered to have roiv. Hold it, but according to Rav, 50% is, by definition, considered the majority. It has the same standing as the majority. On my turn, so why are they tahir if they're 50-50? Zilhacha, look at this part. Ikarub, it's regarded like roiv, because 50% is like roiv, and the same on the other side. Zilhacha Ikarub, go to the other piece. It's also considered like roiv, so they should both be tummy. Amar Papa, listen to this. You can't have two majorities. So even according to Rav, who regards 50% like roiv, that's good when you're able to focus just on that half, like by shechita. Allah is you have to cut through half. He has to cut through roiv. So even when he cuts half, you say that cut is regarded like roiv. It has the same chashiva, significance as roiv. But in this case, where you split the oven into two equal parts, it's a self-contradiction to consider each one as roiv. You can't have two majorities. They're inherently contradictory. They're incompatible. You can't say this is roiv and that's roiv side by side. Amar Papa, Trey Ruby, two aspects of majority, but chadman, one and the same item, the same utensil, like in this oven, like you can't have it. So if this is the roiv of this oven, must be that one is the minority. And if this is the major, this is the mute. So here you can't work with the idea of mechzas karoiv. So in this case, you have to consider each one like a mute, like the minority, like the smaller part. In which case a tanur would be tar, because a mute is tar. The only reason why we can't is because we can't know with exactness. Perhaps there is one of the other, which is one of these two, which is actually more than 50%. So that's why you can't be sure, and you can't make them tar. But in theory, you can know with certainty that each one's only 50%. It would be tar. Even according to Rav. Rav is only talking about an act of shechita. Yeah, the cut, which is 50%, is regarded like it's mostly cut, because it's not the minority. It's not the smaller of the. It's not the miyut. Because there's no conflicting entity opposing it. Rashi says, Lo yuska roiv el b'chaticha. The roiv factor by shechita only pertains to the part that you cut. There's no opposing element that's competing with the cut. So a cut is 50%, and that's enough to be considered like roiv. You're good. But here we have two equal parts of the oven, and each one saying, "I'm roiv." You can't have that. Okay, we'll continue B'ez Hashem tomorrow on this discussion of how to classify mechza al mechza. On the one hand, it's not the minority, it's not the majority. What is it? According to Rav, mechza is keroiv. According to Rav Kahana, mechza is not keroiv. But either way, when it comes to shechita, you have to do more than 50%, at least midrabanan, to ensure that it was a successful shechita. Okay, all the best to you, and atzlacha.